Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio, and we have had a lot of people lately wondering when we're going to have Ken Rohla back on the show. And it's a popular guest because we talk about things that everybody's interested in, especially in the environment that we're dealing with today with all the 5G and things like that. Because Ken is an unusual combination of a health teacher and an engineer inventor. And our conversations go by in minutes, it seems, in an hour or two just flies by. So we're going to cover what we can today. Ken's just back from an interesting trip, and I thought maybe he could tell us a little bit about the places he went and what happened there. And then we'll get into current situations with updates on dealing with the environment that is surrounding all of us, including not only 5G, but other things too. So welcome, Ken. It's a pleasure to have you back. And if you want to tell us a little bit about your trip, that would be fun way to start.
Sure. Thanks, Richard. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Yeah, so maybe a month ago, I went to the Bosnian pyramids for 3 weeks and also toured around Croatia a bit and around Bosnia. And then went from there to the ECETI ranch in Oregon, really close to the Washington state border, out in the country, and just magnificent wilderness. ECETI Ranch is run by James Gilliland, and he basically has events there to call in UFOs and Bigfoot and ETs and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it was definitely interesting and enjoyable and awesome. We can get into that in Bosnia.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if they're actually talking to Bigfoot, I'd like to have him on the show sometime. If he talks, I don't know. But
they have had people with telepathic communication with Bigfoot. It's funny because the area around there, the county, they actually passed an ordinance to make it illegal to hunt Bigfoot. So the local government actually acknowledges the existence of Bigfoot, at least in that way. Okay. Because apparently some hunter, I guess they see Bigfoot quite a lot out there. And I actually heard Bigfoot howl one night, which is pretty interesting. But some hunter was camping out somewhere hunting and overnight, and a Bigfoot came by, and he wanted to get his friends to hunt it, so he ran off to get his friends and came back, and his gun was turned into a pretzel, his rifle was twisted into a pretzel, and his camp was torn up. And
this kind of thing really gives humans a bad name, though, when we have to kill anything that's unusual. Yeah,
well, especially when you listen to the stories of the people who aren't that way having contact. Very interesting at ECETI Ranch. There were several people there when I was there that had direct sightings in the daylight, and what they said was, what they all had in common was they actually walked at the perimeter of the property, and they just transmitted this psychic vibe of, hey, Bigfoot, I love you, not even, hey, come look at me or come, see me, right. Just Bigfoot, I love you. And there was one lady told me that she was transmitting that, and something came up behind her and pushed her knees, like knocked her knees out from underneath her, and it was totally invisible, but it was very strong, so it wasn't like, she was imagining it. And then there were a couple other people that actually saw Bigfoot during the day. And then I was sleeping one night in my room and had the windows open, and for some reason, this is probably like, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, these coyotes on the far end of the property started howling like crazy, just going off, just suddenly, just whoa, 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 and then they suddenly stopped. And then on the other side of the property at my end, this howl came out that at first I thought was a coyote, but it didn't sound anything like a coyote, I wasn't expecting Bigfoot to be howling. So this thing was like, ho, 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 and kind of imitating the coyotes, but its voice was different. It was deeper, and it kind of was hoarse sounding. And
but
really,
you don't know for sure that it was Bigfoot. I mean, it could have been a werewolf.
It could have been anything, but let me put it this way: I've hunted a lot in my youth and been out in nature quite a lot. I've never heard anything like that. It was very different. So maybe it was. But James Gilliland says that there's a Bigfoot family that lives in that area, and sometimes the teenage Bigfoot will come around and goof on people. So they'll put like oranges and peanut butter out for it on the property, and it'll take the oranges and peanut butter and leave them with a gift which usually is something that he's stolen from somebody else. So it'll be like somebody's hat or a knife or something like that. But they have quite a few interactions. And of course, James is very psychic, very empathic and intuitive. And so he communicates with all kinds of different beings there, from Bigfoot to these. There's a mountain across the way from, they have this big field for sighting, for sitting out and looking for UFOs coming in, which there's an abundant plethora of that activity at nighttime and during the daytime too, which we can talk about. But across from this, maybe I don't know how many miles away, there's this big, beautiful snow-capped mountain called Mount Adams. Mm-hmm. And so at nighttime, now the interesting thing is there are no roads that go up Mount Adams. There's only roads down at the bottom of it, and there's some hiking trails down at the bottom of it. But generally people don't go camping there because it's a long way up and it's covered with snow, and you'd have to be a serious mountain climber to even get up there. Right. So it's not like they've got, campers, hanging out all over the place. But at nighttime, that thing will light up with these different lights flashing all over. And they have these big, strong lasers that they'll point at the mountain from ECETI Ranch. And when when a light flares up, they'll point a laser at it, and then the lights very often will like flash and get really big and then shrink and get big and do all this crazy stuff. And there's no way that it's any kind of a conventional light source. In fact, when I was there, the remote viewer John Vivanco was there, and he told me that they had sent a couple of teams up onto the mountain with flashlights and million candle power lights and all that kind of stuff, and shined it back at ECETI. They would shine the laser from ECETI up to the mountain so they could see it, and then they would shine their lights back, and they said you could barely see the lights at all. Mm-hmm. So it definitely, whatever's going on there is not campers or anything like that.
Is that mountain inside Washington, or is it still in Oregon somewhere?
Oh, that's a good question. I believe it is still inside the Oregon border, because it is very close to the border of Washington State. But John Vivanco, who is a professional remote viewer, he actually has a company that remote views for money. And he said that most of his clients are corporate executives and the government itself, because even though the U.S. government has their own highly skilled remote viewers, he said that sometimes they like to tap on his company because they have a different viewpoint when they're dealing with stuff, because they're not military and because they're civilian and because they're loving. They come at it with a different angle. So very often they will see things that military types won't necessarily see, or they just want confirmation of. And so he said that twice they remote viewed Mount Adams, and what they were shown was that these lights flashing were like these portals that open up. He used the word Merkaba, which in my mind is a geometric portal that opens up to other dimensions of time and space. And when you do that, you're bringing in a lot of scalar energy, and so it's conceivable that scalar energy is superluminal light, so it could slow down and make these flashes, or there may be something else going on there, but he did say that there were these portals that were being opened up by these interdimensional beings, and that Mount Adams, there's a very huge scalar vortex there because of some compressed rock underground. This big bed of compressed rock creates a scalar field. And then also there's some big, very large magnetic stone formation underground as well. And so you've got this combination of a magnetic field and a scalar field. And so it's like a natural portal area. And so that's why they see a lot of UFO activity there. They've actually had flying saucers. They filmed land on the land in front of Mount Adams and all kinds of interesting things. And of course, tons of lights in the sky at nighttime, zipping around, doing all kinds of different crazy things that conventional aircraft couldn't do. Yeah. And during the day too. As a matter of fact, there was a young guy. I asked him to send me the video. We'll see if I get it. But he was filming. He was filming through. They had this night vision telescope there, infrared telescope, so you could see lots of stuff going on that you can't see in the visible spectrum. So there's like tons of orbs floating around, and of course different types of lights flying through the sky that the naked eye didn't see. And so he put his camera up to this telescope to film some of it, and he got a bunch of stuff on camera, and he was also filming the sky at night, seeing all these different lights moving around all kinds of weird ways. Mm-hmm. And then And then during the day, he went to make a YouTube video about it all. And he's sitting in front of the field where Mount Adams is in the background. And he's talking about it. And a flying saucer flies by through the frame of his video when he's filming it during the daytime. So there's a lot of UFO activity going on there. And James Gilliland has had a lot of telepathic and other contact with interdimensional beings and ETs there. He says that the mountain is protected by some lion-type beings, some kind of lion-type interdimensional beings. But there's a lot of other kinds of extraterrestrials that they've cited. People have seen, what look like Pleiadian extraterrestrials, humanoid-looking with long blonde hair and blue eyes, and other types of beings, cat beings, and like Black Panther beings, and gray-looking types. All kinds of different ETs there at different times.
Yeah, the protection issue is really relevant because I know at least Stephen Greer and probably other people have pointed out that the military policy now is that if any of those flying vehicles come into the visible spectrum and the physical dimension, their attitude is to shoot them down immediately.
Right.
And so they don't do that so much anymore.
Yeah, well, to the extent that they can. It's kind of hard to shoot something down if you're phased out of 3D, but...
that's what I mean. That's why they don't come into 3D too much anymore.
Right.
I've heard.
Yeah, very true. As a matter of fact, Corey Goode was there speaking, the secret space program whistleblower, and he said that it was extremely unusual anywhere on Earth for a portal place like that to be in private hands. He said normally the military will come and buy it up and sequester it. And he said he's surprised. And James Gilliland did say they've tried to buy it out from under him. Bill Gates offered him a large sum of money to buy it from him. And others have pressured him to sell, but he won't sell.
Mainly to keep it quiet, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, to control it. You cordon it off, then nobody can go there and see all these sightings. I mean, you can still see the stuff in the sky, but they'll have stuff, sometimes flying over and landing there and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And of course, the people it attracts are, the high frequency people from around the world. And it's very, very affordable. This is one of the things I love about James Gilliland. He's very, very ethical, makes things very affordable for people. Whereas when you go to things like Stephen Greer's events and other people's events, they charge thousands of dollars, and they admit it's exclusionary. It's designed to exclude average people. It's designed to attract the elite, so that the elite can be influenced, so that they can influence the planet, which I think is certainly not egalitarian and certainly very reptilian. Hint, hint.
Interesting.
So James Gilliland I just really love. And, interestingly enough, too, because he invited Corey Goode to speak there, and Corey Goode, from everything that I have seen and experienced in my own life with extraterrestrial contact, and then listening to Corey Goode, I think that he is honest and forthright with his information. And so the powers that be appear not to want him to get much of an audience, and so they're doing everything they can to attack those that support him. And so apparently there are some people online, Cliff High and some others, who have been claiming that James Gilliland is running a cult at ECETI, which is really ridiculous because when there's no events going on there, which is most of the time, there's only 3 or 4 people living there. So I don't know how you can have a cult with 3 or 4 people, number one. But number two, it's obviously not a cult. They told me at ECETI that there were some people that tried to sneak in because they have a locked gate, and they had some cars come up that tried to sneak in when people were exiting. And they identified themselves as being affiliated with Cliff High. So for folks out there who are big fans of Cliff High, I've never been a fan of Cliff High, not because of anything like that, but just because I've seen him make prediction after prediction that didn't come true. And so, not to denigrate him, but I just, I don't resonate with his message. Let's put it that way.
What was the event that you went to that they were holding there at James's Ranch?
What event was I at?
No, wasn't there some gathering or something going on when you went there, or did you just go to visit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a conference, the ECETI summer conference. So they had like 350 people there, and people were camping all over the property and stuff. And yeah, they had a bunch of speakers, me, Corey Good, John Vivanco, the remote viewer, Jordan Sather, the Edge of Wonder guys, Rob and Ben from Edge of Wonder channel on YouTube, and a bunch of other folks speaking, and really good information. So yeah, it was like 5 days of talks all day long, and then going out at night and watching the skies and seeing all these lights and things coming in.
Right. So what occurs to me is that with life on this planet kind of hanging by a thread, and ecological disasters just right on the verge of happening and already in progress in some ways, and the wars and the planned diseases and all the assaults from the rulers against humanity, with all the focus for many years on the ET presence and the communication that people say they're having, it just seems like it should get down to sitting down and having a discussion with some of these guys and saying, what's your input that'll help us not have to go through this extermination of life on the planet that the rulers are planning right now?
Oh, well, there are tons and tons of people. I'd say probably millions of people that are having ET contact of various kinds. I mean, I've met so many scientists and engineers and inventors who have had ET contact, some of them continually, and that is going on. It's going on in mass, quite a lot.
So what's coming out of it? I mean,
well, what's coming out of it are all kinds of solutions. I mean, I've talked about solutions, technological and otherwise, for all of these threats to our health, and free energy. All kinds of stuff that people have developed. I've worked with free energy back in the 90s. I've seen lots of different kinds of free energy technologies, and most of the people, if not all the people that were involved, were admittedly having extraterrestrial contact. In some cases, they were very Christian, and so through that belief system, they believed that Jesus or God or somebody, angels, were giving them the information. But wherever it's coming from, there's lots of help coming onto this planet, and the powers that be know very well. They're very desperate. That's why they're clamping down on YouTube and Google and those kinds of things. I mean, we've had my channel has taken big hits in the search results, and my website, and our sales plummeted, and we've had to do a lot of things to compensate. And then PayPal shut us down last November for nonsense with their algorithms. It's always blaming it on the algorithm, no human being. And
the algorithm determined that you were too dangerous to have money, I guess.
Exactly. So anybody doing anything that threatens the existing paradigm, they're getting penalized in these ways, and it's because they're getting desperate. And they're getting desperate because there's so much information out and so many answers out there now, and all of the lies, people are seeing through it like that. One of the things I love about Jordan Sather when we were there, and I told him that he really sees through the lies and really does a service on his YouTube channel to inform people of what's really going on. And so people are getting downloads, they're getting all kinds of information and intuitions and whatever in various ways, and physical contact as well. But it's happening all over the place. And when you go to these places like the Bosnian pyramids, when you go to ECETI and these places where high frequency people congregate, you'll bump into tons of people that are having ET contact, And I mean, just at the week that we were there were bunches of people that were seeing interdimensional beings and having encounters and stuff. So it is going on. It's not in the mainstream media. And so people tend to feel, if they're buying into the nonsense that's being fed to us through mainstream media and the censorship on YouTube and such, then they may feel hopeless and feel like that nothing's changing or that things are getting worse. But in fact, there's a lot of stuff that has to be cleared out of our society before we can really move forward. And so you see, like, Jeffrey Epstein just got arrested, the pedophile to the stars, basically. So those kinds of things need to be cleared out of the way before we can really shift things and be unimpeded. So, I predict you will see Google and YouTube collapse. I think that people will opt out of them when other better options come along that are uncensored. I think you're going to see more and more of these pedophiles and people getting arrested and put in jail But it can't happen too fast, because then lots and lots of people would blow a fuse, and and just people are already freaking out. I mean, geez, it's like, you should see the emails I get all the time where people are flipping out, worrying about stuff. And so you can imagine if there was just this huge dump where ETs show up and say, "Hey, we're here," and all
are
your
they worried
religions are
about
bogus.
ETs showing up? Or are they just worried about all the junk that's happening in the world?
Well, I think both. I think they know that there's ET intervention in all kinds of things that have been preventing the powers that be from causing more harm and damaging the earth and destroying humanity. I mean, just look, for example, at the Hadron Collider. I mean, they were doing all kinds of experiments with the Hadron Collider, and I recall they were trying to open up a portal with it, and their experiment didn't do anything. And I mean, it didn't do anything when it should have done something. And so they had one of their physicists come out and say, very unscientifically, "I guess God doesn't want us doing this," which is so typical of the double standard that these people use when anybody else starts talking about alternative science like scalar energy technology or whatever. They poo-poo and dismiss it as unscientific, but then they go and say all this pseudoscientific mumbo-jumbo when it suits them. So at any rate, the story is, from people in the know have said that the Hadron Collider incident was stopped by extraterrestrials so that they wouldn't destroy the Earth, because they don't know what they're doing.
That's what people may know as CERN, right?
Right.
The CERN project.
Yeah, and actually, I was told by, I'll just say I was told by a secret space program insider recently that that the CERN collider, the big public one in Europe, is not the big one. That there's another secret one that's even bigger, that's being utilized to do all kinds of experiments, mainly to open up portals to other dimensions, times, and places, and have basically a Stargate.
Yeah.
For reasons.
Especially if it could let any evil into the world that would accelerate the destruction, I think they'd be all excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, they've been interacting with reptilians and others that don't have our best interests, and so that influence is being stopped. But and that's why you see this desperate fight for control that they're losing, but it's not over with yet. And so you see the desperate moves of these human beings and these extraterrestrials that have been manipulating and involved in our society.
Yeah, pretty interesting. So just diverting for a minute back to your other stop, which was in Bosnia. People may remember that Sam Osmanovic was on the show, and he was the person that discovered that whole complex, I guess, of pyramids in Bosnia, the biggest one of which is bigger than the Great Pyramid. And did you get to see Sam, and what did you do while you were over there?
Oh, yeah. I got to see Sam. I was there for 8 days with Sam at the conference every day, and I was speaking at the conference a couple of days there. So, yeah, when I go do events, I make a point to be available for people to be able to talk to me and ask me questions and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I was there every day, like from 8 in the morning until midnight, basically talking to somebody all day long. And same thing at ECETI. I was, available the whole time. It kind of bothers me when people are paying good money to come to these events, and then the speakers run off and hide when they're not on the stage. Yeah, and that really irks me. So I make a point not to do that. So yeah, I was hanging out.
What was the conference in Bosnia?
Well, it was their June Pyramid Conference. They have a May Pyramid Conference, they have a June Pyramid Conference, and then they have one in September. Okay. And so this one, they had me. I was a speaker. They were supposed to have a man from France named Patrice Marty who hosts large events and knows a lot of interesting things, a lot of esoteric history and things, but he couldn't make it. And then there was Sue Jones, who was an archaeologist who also happens to be very psychic, and she was very, very fascinating. So Sue and I, during the day, they would take us out to these different archaeological sites, most of them in the pyramid complex, because you've got 3 large pyramids, and then you've got a cone-shaped hill that's a couple hundred feet high. They call it tumulus. And then there's these giant stone spheres that are like perfectly round, symmetrical stone spheres, like 15 feet in diameter, and a bunch of other energy structures around. So we were going around and I was explaining the physics of how they work, because basically these pyramids they're giant pieces of organite. They're made out of lots and lots, millions of tons of round river rock that's high enormous, and then it's layered in with clay, and it's exactly what you would do if you wanted to create scalar energy. And so I was just explaining the physics of how they worked and what I figured that they probably were used for, or at least some of the uses. And as I was doing that, Sue, the psychic archaeologist, is going, that's exactly what my guides are saying. That's exactly what my guides are saying. This is what it was used for.
Interesting. Okay.
And then they took us off-site to some archaeological sites. One was this giant cave that was really, really interesting. I mean, it was probably 75 to 100 feet tall inside and just gigantic. And it really, I could feel the energy of people that had lived there before, and maybe even now, maybe there's some interdimensional beings there.
Yeah.
But it felt like, that like ancient people had lived inside these caves. And then they took us to a monolith that was very interesting. It was out away from, maybe an hour away from the pyramids, out in the country, and it wasn't part of like a national park or anything. It was just kind of hidden in the woods, and the local people knew about it. So they took us there, and I'm looking at this obelisk, and it was made out of white stone, no doubt high enormous, and it was maybe 15 feet tall, and it was shaped like the Washington Monument with the pyramid at the point, except that this one had the corners of the obelisk had like carved into them like these ropes, like this twisting rope shape going up the corners, which are scalar wave guides. And then at the top of the pyramid, unlike the Washington Monument, it had a big stone ball that was carved out of it. And so I look at everything. Oh, and also on the side, very interestingly, it had these spirals carved into the side, which were wave guides to direct vortices out the sides, and these other patterns to direct scalar energy out of certain frequencies out of the sides. And then on each side, it also had, on every side, a little reptilian man carved into it. And so, from looking at all of this and understanding that this stone was most likely high in monoatomic elements, which makes it ideal for conducting scalar energy and human consciousness as a form of scalar energy, I deduced that this thing was a communication device that the local people, and also it would enhance life for many miles around, just by grounding these energies from the sun and the earth and then rebroadcasting them. And that's exactly what it appeared to be, because everywhere around there it was just magnificently beautiful and lush and green, and springs flowing and ferns and all kinds of plant life and all kinds of animals. So it was enhancing the life force in that area, for one thing. But also I believe it was a communication device, because I was seeing these groups of people getting together, surrounding it, and sending their consciousness to this obelisk and then rebroadcasting it out through this thing. So as I'm describing all of this, the archaeologist, who's very psychic and very confirmed, it's not like she's just making stuff up. She would see things you could confirm. Yeah. She was seeing the same thing that I was seeing, that these groups would gather in concentric rings of people. They would make rings of, concentric rings of people around this thing, and then they would meditate and visualize running energy around the circles of people in opposite directions. So the inner circle might be clockwise, the circle around it counterclockwise, the circle around that clockwise. And so what you would do is create a scalar vortex and open up a portal or a black hole or whatever you want to call it, and then they could communicate with their gods and potentially maybe other people elsewhere on the planet. Right. And so this is what I was seeing, and then she's sitting there confirming, that's exactly what my guides are saying, that's exactly what my guides are saying. And then she gave further details on it, which was quite interesting. And so, it was really, really fascinating as far as, the external stuff, going and seeing all these cool things, and meeting lots of wonderful people, because, the pyramids are attracting the highest frequency people on the planet. So it's just a gigantic love fest of just everybody just, is kind and loving, and great food. They have like an organic juice bar and smoothie bar and Bosnian, like authentic organic Bosnian food next to the pyramid tunnels. And so we bounced between going and seeing all these different structures, the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon. I had an interesting experience on that. That's like the second largest pyramid. And I drove up to the top of that, which was quite an adventure because the roads were really bad and really steep. And got up there and had some friends with me, and then we did a meditation. And these structures, for me, I was going to all these different pyramids and things, and I was also meditating inside these tunnels, which we'll talk about. But all of that, what I found was, and I was also drinking lots of pyramid water.
That should be.
Yeah, the pyramid water, and we can talk a lot about pyramid water in some detail, but the pyramid water, they've got all this water inside the pyramids, and they're bottling it, and they're giving it to people, or they're selling it, and people are drinking it and going inside these tunnels inside the pyramid complex and meditating and getting healed of major disease.
Mm-hmm.
So they are telling people to take a cap full of this water and put it into a glass of water or a pitcher of water and then let it sit, and it'll structure the water. Well, I was drinking like 12 bottles of this stuff every day straight.
Just straight, yeah, exactly.
And so everybody was flipping out. But I'll tell you what it is ormus. It's structured ormus water. The pyramids have these tunnels that connect them and underneath them, and so they've excavated a lot of these tunnels, and so they call them the Ravne tunnels. And so people are going inside of these tunnels, and they're drinking the pyramid water, and they're going and meditating, and people are going in there with diseases like stage 4 lung cancer and Parkinson's disease and diabetes and blindness and all kinds of stuff, and they meditate anywhere from one day for a few hours to a couple of weeks, and they're getting cured of these major diseases.
Just so people will understand, why don't you clarify what's pyramid water if they don't know?
Yeah. So, and this was actually, I got a little download on this when I was there, because I was drinking so much of this pyramid water. It was raising the conductivity in my body and making it easier to meditate and stuff.
Right.
But basically what this stuff is, pyramids are like, they're scalar wave antennas. They capture this energy coming from the sun and from the center of the earth, and then they rebroadcast it in a local field, in the case of the Bosnian pyramids, for hundreds of miles around.
Yeah.
And because of this scalar field, it's groundwater has minerals in them, along with conventional minerals that we're familiar with, inorganic minerals. They also have monoatomic minerals in them. These monoatomic minerals just means that they're elements that have individual atoms that are not connected to each other. And so in that form, they have really weird properties. They look like white ceramic powders. They're anti-gravitational. They're multidimensional, meaning they exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions of time and space. They're in nature. They're in our bodies. They're in plants. They're in groundwater. They're in ocean water. They're in all sorts of stuff. And they normally, soil, when they're down in the ground, in the aquifers, the soil will hold them down in the ground, even though they're anti-gravitational. But when they accumulate in aquifers that are large enough, they will levitate up to the surface. And this is what brings spring water up to the surface most of the time. It's not usually hydrostatic pressure.
You're saying that these are individual atoms that are not part of any molecule.
Right, they're not connected in any way. And so, according to mainstream science, that doesn't happen except in weird lab experiments. But in fact, it happens all the time in nature, and we've got them within our bodies. And in fact, it's being proven, even in mainstream science journals now, they're proving that DNA has superconductivity in it, the brain neural pathways, and what we call the acupuncture meridians and the chakras. They're just junctures of these superconducting minerals that create basically little black holes throughout the body. And so the body is like this web of black holes that's created by these superconducting elements. And so photosynthesis, vortexing water in magnetic fields, fermentation, they can create these monatomic elements. So within soil, microbes eat rocks, and they break them down into particles with just a few atoms. Those are known as angstrom particles, or they break them down into the monoatomics, which are individual discrete atoms. They're not connected to each other. And so they're held down in the soil. But when these pyramids are built, the scalar fields on these pull on that ormus, and so it really pulls the water up to the surface. And so when you go inside these tunnels that they've excavated in the pyramid complex, you'll see like underground streams and creeks and water, lakes and things, ponds sitting. And this water is very high in these monoatomics. And one of the properties for us with these monoatomics is they're very, very regenerative to cellular tissue for a lot of different purposes. So they basically accelerate healing in the body because they act as conduits for scalar energy that's all around us, which is superluminal light. It's light energy that's traveling millions of times faster than the conventional speed of light. And so our scientists will call it, because it appears invisible or black to our instruments and to our eyes, scientists will call it dark energy or dark matter or other ridiculous things, interstellar winds and that kind of stuff. It's very unscientific. But what it really is superluminal light. And it's what everything is made of. This entire physical cosmos and other dimensions of time and space are composed of this energy as it slows down and coagulates into our reality. And
superluminal meaning it goes faster than what people understand as the speed of light.
Right. I was taught in engineering school, for example, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second.
Right.
But this energy travels millions of times, almost instantaneously, faster than that. And so within our bodies, it's really what consciousness is too. Consciousness is a form of the scalar energy. And so, we have this constant flow of our consciousness flowing in and out of our physical bodies, and it flows through these superconducting monoatomic elements in the DNA and the neural pathways along the spine where the chakras are, and the brain neural pathways and the nervous system. This energy is continually flowing in and out. Hence, these practices like Tai Chi and Qigong and Ayurveda, working with the prana or the Qi. That's what it is. It's this energy of consciousness, but it's light.
Do you think superluminal, super or supra? I guess it's super.
Super.
Right? Superluminal light actually has a speed? Or is it instantaneous to any distance?
I think it's really instantaneous. It can act, I think in its slower forms, it can act like a wave and traverse space. But generally, it's more like the old ether that was conceived of in the 1800s, where all empty space is full of this energy, and we can tap it. So it's really more like that. Everything, this whole reality, even physical matter, if you look at the subatomic structure of atoms, there's a lot of so-called empty space in there, but it's not empty. It's full of this superluminal light. And so whether you're talking about empty space or within the space inside of matter, basically this light flows through everything, kind of like the Force in Star Wars. So basically we're living in a holographic universe, which many physicists have, talked about and confirmed. And it slows down and coagulates into what we consider physical matter and the solid world. Yeah. But because it's flowing through everything, it can do interesting things. Because it creates and alters matter, it can radically alter matter within the body. And this is how you can do things like, heal brain cancer in 4 hours, which I've seen done just by working on the mind and working with consciousness, or using Kriya Kundalini yoga or meditation and other energy techniques to heal major disease very quickly within the body by altering the matter using your own scalar energy of consciousness. So these pyramids, when you drink this pyramid water, what you're doing is raising the superconductivity in the body massively by drinking this Ormus water from the pyramids. Mm-hmm. These pyramids actually create this water. They pull it up from aquifers really strongly because their scalar fields pull it up from deep underground. But I also got a download when I was there, and I told Sam Osmanagic to get some science done to investigate this. And there's actually scientific precedent for it. That I got the information that as I was leaving one day that the water inside those pyramids, a lot of it is being created from the minerals in the ground. The scalar energy is somehow interacting with the minerals and creating the water. And then the oxygen, see, they have very, very pure air inside these pyramid tunnels going miles down inside the ground. Yeah. You go way down in there, and the air has 20% oxygen, and it's very pure. Even when you get a bunch of people in a little tiny space meditating and breathing there for hours, the air stays perfectly fresh and clean. Wow. And 20% oxygen. And they've measured this. This is not conjecture. I've been on the team of engineers and scientists measuring all these different data points on these different structures. So we know a lot about what's going on there.
Yeah,
but
isn't the standard for really good oxygen content supposed to be about 18 on the surface usually?
Exactly, yeah. And when you go into a big city like New York, it's down around 7 or 8%. So yeah, 20% oxygen is like primordial. That's what Earth was probably like before humans polluted it.
Yeah, it would make you feel a lot better to live in that level.
It does. And of course, breathing in oxygen also accelerates healing in the body. I mean, that's a big factor in cellular regeneration. So all these different therapies, whether it's hyperbaric chambers or drinking wheatgrass juice or whatever, it's getting oxygen into the cells.
Yeah, but there's got to be a difference between the concentrated oxygen in a metal tank compared to what you're talking about.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, no doubt. But this, what I got was that the water molecules, the scalar energy that these pyramids are creating and the tunnels are creating, are actually creating O2 from the H2O in the water. All right. Mm-hmm. So I told Sam, here's what I got. Maybe you can do some science on it and prove it. Well, I just saw yesterday a scientific. I wouldn't say it was a study. It was an experiment that some physicists did, where they discovered that comets were actually creating oxygen around them, and they could potentially have a breathable atmosphere. And they figured out it was because of the comet hurtling through space was getting hit with all these energies that would convert the stone and monoatomic gold into oxygen on the comet's surface. And I remember too that NASA had a technology years ago that they were talking about taking to the moon, that you could create oxygen from rock. So this is what I think is going on inside these pyramid tunnels, that the scalar energy that these devices are putting out is actually converting some of the oxygen and the H2O into O2 in these tunnels. Sam was saying he teaches that it's the shape of the tunnels going from large to small, acting like a pumping action. But that's absolutely impossible because, number one, the oxygen outside the tunnels is nowhere near 20%.
Right.
You've got the neighboring town blowing pollution around there, so that oxygen level is nowhere near 20%. And you've got some of these tunnels go kilometers deep into these into the ground. There's no way that air is getting ventilated that far without some kind of serious propulsion. And you would feel wind. You don't feel any wind inside these tunnels.
So you talked to him about that, right? An alternative explanation.
I did. I said, next time you get a budget for it, see if you can do some science on that and prove what's going on. And also when I mentioned that to him, the psychic archaeologist Sue Jones was there, and she said that she had saw the same thing and had told him that previously, and that the oxygen is being created from the water in the pyramids. So it's a really fascinating environment, but it's also an extremely healing environment. And so they've got people going in there, like they had a lady came from Serbia last August, went in there and was drinking the pyramid water and meditating 2 hours a day. And in 2 weeks, she went back to her. Oh, and by the way, she had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and her doctors told her she's only had 30 days to live. They said, go home and, kiss your butt goodbye, basically.
Especially if we treat you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and she did. She had chemo and radiation. And so, she went in these tunnels for a couple of weeks and then went back home, and the doctors couldn't find any trace of cancer or the damage from the radiation and chemo.
So if somebody's got the money to travel, they could do that, right?
Right.
And do they pay when they get there or not?
Well, if you're coming to the conference, you register for the conference in advance, but you can go there anytime.
No, I mean just anytime.
Yeah, you can go there anytime. I don't think they charge to go in the tunnels. Everything's free, and you can actually dig on the archaeological sites if you want. They actually have open archaeology. So this is one of the things I love about Sam Osmanagic. You go anywhere else in the world, and archaeological digs are always closed. And
so that's under a government of some kind, isn't it?
The Bosnian pyramids?
The Bosnian government don't they decide the policy on that kind of thing?
Well, no. Interestingly enough, Bosnian government is not very developed. Bosnia is a very poor country, and the government in general is very corrupt. And so there's not much regulation, and there's actually not much interest in the pyramids, except for the fact that now, 12 years later, 13 years later, after Sam first discovered them, now they're supporting them a little bit because it's bringing in tourist money. They've got about 38,000 people visiting each year right now for the pyramids, and it's bringing in tourism dollars. So now they're starting to listen to him a little bit and support him a little bit, as opposed to fighting him on things. But
does the government own all that land that the pyramid complex is on?
No, they own one small piece at the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, and the rest of it is owned in private hands. And so Sam has been buying it up so that he can protect it and keep it from being exploited or ruined.
Good.
And so he's bought hundreds of acres of land around there, and they're putting in a healing center right now. Actually, they're building a healing center, and I'm advising them on that.
Wow.
So it's just turning into a really magnificent place. They've got this beautiful park that's several hundred acres large that they've landscaped in some places and put all these really beautiful sculptures and things in place and monoliths, and they built a big stage. So like when I was there, they had 3 days of music concerts, which was awesome. You know, everybody's hanging out, and they had this huge grassy hill in front of the stage, and hundreds of people just hanging out, listening to great music, eating great food, absorbing the pyramid energy, and going in the tunnels from time to time, and then listening to this incredible music. It was just amazing, amazing time.
I would think that could really help the country of Bosnia eventually, right?
Well, I think it is. Sam's been measuring the energy coming off these things ever since several years ago, and so he's seen that as they open up more and more of these tunnels connecting the pyramid complex, the energy of all the structures is getting stronger and stronger, and it appears to be affecting consciousness there. So I think what you're going to see is Bosnia is a very wounded country. You know, they were involved in the war when Yugoslavia broke up. And so there's a lot of trauma there, a lot of trauma. I mean, everybody I talked to had people in their immediate family killed in the war. The apartment I was staying in when I was there had bullet holes in the doors and out on the balconies and stuff. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So there's a lot of trauma that needs to be healed from that. And I think the opening up of the pyramids and sending out more of this energy is really doing that, because it really seems to be shifting the consciousness of the people there.
So how is Sam raising the funds to do that huge project? Where's that coming from?
I don't know, because it amazes me how much he gets done. Every year I come there, it's like a whole ton of new stuff is there. It's like this year, last year all the roads were dirt, and there's just a lot of stuff was undeveloped. And now it's like he's got roads paved, he's got parking lots put in, he's got a healing center going up, he's got a conference room built, he's got all these vendor booths set up and all kinds of stuff. I don't know where he's getting it. I know a lot of it's coming in from donations. I also know that he spent hundreds of thousands, if not more, dollars of his own money developing it. But yeah, he's a miracle worker. I told him, it's like, I don't know how he gets so much done. I call him the James Brown of archaeology, because he's the hardest working man in archaeology. That's
amazing. So, and what's the climate like over there? Is that a severe Central European climate, or?
In the summertime, it's magnificent. Most buildings don't have air conditioning because it just doesn't get warm enough to need it.
Right.
So in the daytime, it might get into the, like I was there, I think when I first got there, I was there on the hottest day of the year, and it was 88 degrees. And it was a little bit warm in the apartment that I was in. And everybody was talking about what a heat wave it was. And then, after that, it cooled down and it was normal. So at nighttime, it would be in the maybe upper 60s, and daytime, it would be in the upper 70s, low 80s. So it was just perfect. It was just magnificent.
Wow. And then,
wintertime, it gets cold. Sarajevo was where they had the Winter Olympics years ago. So there's lots of snow and ice and cold there in the wintertime.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, pretty interesting. So if somebody, for those people who can't afford to travel to Bosnia, how can they use those technologies on a smaller scale to do something for themselves at home?
Well, that's exactly what Sam Osmanagish's goal is, to learn enough about these pyramids and these structures so that it can be replicated and taught to other people around the world, so that they don't have to come to Bosnia. And that's what I've been lecturing about for many years, actually. So, for example, you can build pyramids in your own property, and they don't have to be gigantic, and they don't have to be complicated. that can do things like protect yourself from EMF, electromagnetic fields, or improve the weather, clear chemtrails, enhance plant growth, structure water. It's like I've got a well, and I have one of my powered scalar wave generators right over my well to structure the water in the well before it even gets out of it.
So the pyramid is a transceiver, right? It's taking in energy and it's sending it out.
Right. It's an antenna. So it's picking up this energy from the sun and from the earth. And if there's any people around, it'll pick up the energy from the people. And so you can get meditation groups together and meditate around this thing or inside of them and send out your energy. But because it's an antenna and it's receiving as well as broadcasting, if you're in them or around them, if you're meditating or focusing on whatever, it will accelerate whatever you're focused on. It's like the scalar waves that the pyramid puts out acts like a carrier wave for human consciousness. And so it's kind of like doing a sweat lodge, where it'll accelerate manifestation of whatever you're focused on.
There's a problem with that, though, because in the average person's consciousness, you don't really want to manifest it faster because of the nature of what it's like, right?
Well, but if you've got a pyramid like one built with sacred geometry, like the Giza pyramid or V ratio pyramids or such, they are only going to pick up frequencies that are uplifting or harmonious to us.
That was my question. Yeah, it would have some kind of a harmonizing effect.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't, magnify and accelerate your fears, right? That wouldn't be too useful.
Right.
But it's going to look for positive things to magnify.
Exactly. It's just like my rest shield devices and my home shield devices, my powered scalar wave generators. They're using natural frequencies and minerals to create frequencies and harmonics that will only resonate with uplifting thought. And so same thing with pyramids. Now, by the way, conversely, monatomic elements, these Ormus elements, there are a lot of people that are ingesting alchemical forms of these monoatomic elements, and I've advised against this for many years. I'm just starting to recommend doing that a little bit because we're going to need it with 5G and these other threats coming our way. But when you ingest these alchemical forms of these monoatomics, they plug into the DNA and the nervous system and the brain, and they will radically accelerate manifestation of thought. And so they do
any kind of thought.
Any kind of thought, yeah, it's indiscriminate.
So just so that people follow you, what do you mean when you say these alchemical forms? That refers to alchemy, obviously, but what specifically do you mean by that?
Well, they're forms of monoatomics that are made in some laboratory conditions rather than naturally through photosynthesis or fermentation or vortex water.
Most of the ones sold are what you're saying.
Right. So, for example, there's something called the wet method, where you can take sea salt and mix it with lye and then vortex it, and it will separate out into this white powder. You can filter out this white powder, and it's a silicate that's high in monoatomics, and you can ingest it. And a lot of people are doing that. And number one, getting heavy metal poisoning because you have to test the source and know that what's in it. Number one.
Yeah.
But then also, when you raise the superconductivity too fast in the body, then what happens is you don't have the normal safety mechanism that we have that prevents us from manifesting everything we think of, and that's called time. Normally, at the rate of
a horror movie if you don't do that.
Right. At the rate of conductivity of our body in normal situations, we don't manifest every fleeting thought that we think about. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
And so. Or nightmares, when you go to bed. Although imagine
exactly, make them a lot more realistic.
Thought of came true.
Yeah.
So these you can take a little bit of these monoatomic forms, and they won't hurt you. But if you overdo it, you can royally mess yourself up. And I've seen people who've been in car wrecks, or who are emotional wrecks, or are way out of balance spiritually. I met a guy, for example, who was taking significant amounts of alchemical ormus every day for 4 years, and he was an absolute genius. And this is where people kind of get addicted to it because it plugs into the pineal gland and the brain, and you become very, very smart and also very, very empathic and intuitive. But at the same time, if you haven't done the spiritual work to handle that, it throws you out of balance in other ways. So this guy literally he told me that he had to be careful about getting into arguments with his family members because he would literally knock them out with his mind.
Right. Not super
And then when
spiritual.
I was having a conversation with him on the phone, and he was trying to explain this device to me that he had developed, and I could feel his mind like grabbing onto my mind, trying to force me to see it.
Right.
And I had to tell him, like, whoa, you need to stop that. And he didn't even have any idea he was doing it.
You can have related problems like that with drugs and psychedelics too. Even the ones from so-called natural sources. I've seen examples of that.
Yeah, and it can also open up these portals or openings within the body and within the psyche that allow parasitic entities to come in and attach to you.
Yeah, something like if you're drunk all the time.
Right.
It does the same thing. Takes the defenses down.
Exactly. It's very, very much so. So, so for many, many years, I just told people, look, don't do it. Don't ingest it, because if you're spiritually ready for this stuff, you don't need it. And if you're not spiritually ready, you can burn yourself. Yeah. But I think now, in my experience, I've been experimenting for the last several months, and I think people will be okay if they don't overdo the amount. So we're actually going to be carrying very soon a monoatomic supplement on our website, an Ormus supplement called Vancouver Island Ormus. Mm-hmm. And you just take a teaspoon a day, and that's it. And believe me, you don't want to take more than that. But that does definitely accelerates healing, enhances your awareness, your intuition, but it doesn't send you over the deep end with it if you take it as recommended.
Right. And if you wanted to, you said you could put a pyramid in where you live or in your house or on your property, or if you make a small one, do you have to actually make it solid, or can you just do the outline? Because I've seen that a lot too.
You can just do the outline, but rather than making out of metal, I always recommend for people to make it out of a non-metal material, either wood or plastic or masonry or something like that. Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to host Russian pyramid scientist Valery Uvarov here at my house in April of 2020. I was going to do it in November this year, but we don't have time. So we'll do it in April 2020. We're going to show people how to build large pyramids, probably out of masonry. But you can
super interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool because you see the effects. You see the bottom line.
So that's a solid pyramid, right?
That'll be solid, yeah. And most likely the construction method is going to be out of masonry, but not
masonry. You mean like blocks or something?
Well, not block. It's either bricks. Probably going to be this. Masonry sheet like Wonderboard that you put behind tile in bathrooms. Uh-huh. It'll either be something like that with a stucco coating over it, or it will be possibly aircrete, which is concrete where you bubble air into it, real fine bubbles of air, and it turns into like this concrete shaving cream that you can mold and form, but it's very, very light and it's strong. Because here in Florida where I'm at, if we make it out of wood, the termites will get it.
Yeah.
So exactly. I want to figure out something that anybody can build anywhere for a reasonable amount of time and money. So it's probably going to be one of those two, but we've got some experiments.
So it will look solid, but the inside will be hollow, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay, so let's say that logistics didn't matter. Is there an advantage, like was done in Egypt and Bosnia, to making a pyramid that's completely solid on the inside with natural material?
Well, none of them are actually completely solid. It's like the Giza pyramids. They've got waveguide tunnels and stuff inside of them.
Yeah, except for the tunnels and stuff. But I mean, it's not just a facade.
Right, yeah. Well, only in that when you've got stone that's high in Ormus, the more of it you've got there, the stronger scalar field it's going to create. Mm-hmm. So that's the advantage to having something. Like Valery Uvarov, for example, he is making this big pyramid complex in Russia where people can actually come and live. That's the goal. And he's got, I think, like 16 pyramids in this grid. And he's got a large 50-foot tall pyramid at the center. And then he's got 30-foot tall pyramids in the four corners around that. And he's got 16-foot tall pyramids around that. And those are made out of poured concrete, quartz concrete. He actually, instead of sand, he used quartz silica to make the concrete. And so these are like gleaming white pyramids. And
those are solid. They're not just the facade.
Well, they're sort of solid. They're like the Egyptian pyramids in that mostly solid, but they've got rooms in some of them. Like some of them have pyramid-shaped rooms within them or chambers, and then they've got some tunnels and waveguides in some of them and different structures inside them. So they're not like completely solid, but they're built more like the Egyptian pyramids where they're mostly solid. Yeah.
And he's going to invite people to live there full time?
Yeah. He's right now, he's developing the land. He's got the pyramids in place now, and I guess it's just a matter of money and time. But you can go to my blog at freshandaliveblog.com, and I've got a video flyover there of what's actually there, and then they have some drawing or some diagrams of what he's proposing to be there. But yeah, he wants to build like a community there that people can live and be amongst the pyramids like, we did many thousands of years ago.
Wow. So actually, okay. So there's a couple that's one scale that you can do, is actually live inside a pyramid. But if you have a small...
Correction.
Okay. All right. What?
Not live inside of. This is something that Valeri discovered, and there were, I guess, some investors wanted to build a pyramid-shaped healing center in Russia, and they did. And they spent like $1 million building this thing, and then they discovered that it actually wasn't good for people to be living inside of them, because when you're in there all the time, it's just too much energy. And so it was basically magnifying the personalities of the people that were in there. And so you can imagine, in some cases that might be a good thing, in some cases it might not be a good thing.
Right.
But it was throwing people off balance big time. And so Valeri went public with it and told everybody that it was not good for them. And so the investors lost their money, and then they attacked him. And that's why if you go online and Google his name, you'll see all kinds of websites trashing him and stuff. It's because these guys created these websites saying he's like affiliated with the Russian mafia and all kinds of nonsense.
Yeah, right. And so in the complex that's being built, they're going to have the pyramids at strategic locations, and then what, regular houses in between?
Right, exactly.
Where the people will live.
Yeah, like a planned community with pyramids all around.
Right, exactly. And what part of Russia is that going to be in?
It's just outside of Tomsk, Russia, which is a university town in Siberia. He wanted to put it near the university. I'm not sure I'm sure one of the significant reasons is because it's on a ley line, no doubt. He probably put it on a really big ley line in Russia,
right,
which is a scalar vortex line. And then he said that he wanted the beneficial energy of the pyramid complex to benefit the students at the local university there.
Well, hopefully in Russia, the universities are not going as crazy as in America.
No, they're much more open to this kind of stuff than our society, for sure. So, yeah, it's not so freaky to them.
Yeah. Wow. So if you wanted to let's say you have a small apartment that you live in or something like that, and you want to benefit from the pyramid energy. So you want to build something, and you could just build the outline, which means that the edges where it's four-sided, right? Not three.
Well, you can do three-sided, you can do four-sided, or you can do a cone. All three will work.
Okay. And if you're doing that, what about what they talk about, the incredible impact of the correct ratio of the lengths of the sides and the base and the height, and the orientation toward magnetic directions and things like that?
Yeah, what you're doing is building an antenna, and so just like any antenna, it can be tuned to different frequencies. Right. So the materials are important, and the angles of the pyramid are important, and then the size. The bigger you make it, the more strongly it will receive signal. But for a rule of thumb, probably a good general purpose shape to use to make a pyramid around the house would be where you make all sides of the pyramid equilateral triangles. That's kind of like a good general purpose pyramid for improving meditation, improving health, structuring water, improving plant growth, those kinds of things. And then, Alexander Golod, the Russian pyramid scientist, he was working mostly with phi ratio pyramids, which is phi is a irrational number that is when you're building a pyramid with this ratio, it's one of the taller, thinner pyramids. Okay. But basically, it's the ratio of the of the base to the height of the pyramid gives you phi. And then the Giza pyramids, their ratio is pi. And so, you can use those dimensions, but I think any of those would work well.
When you say the ratio of the base to the height, you mean one side of the base, right?
Right. Yeah. Like if you look at the pyramid as a right triangle, like half the pyramid is a right triangle, it would be the base to the height, just like in trigonometry. Okay. For those of you that remember trigonometry.
Yeah. Of course, it's something everybody uses every day, right? So. Yeah.
I know. If I had a dime for every time I used trig, man, I'd be a millionaire.
You'd have like almost the first time. So.
But you can go online, if you're not sure about that, you can just go online and Google phi ratio, pyramid dimensions, or, pi ratio.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what to read as a building guide.
Yeah, the easiest thing is just to make the sides all equilateral triangles and then stick them together, and you got yourself a pyramid.
What about directional orientation?
Yeah, and you don't have to build a giant pyramid starting out. Of course, I've been teaching people how to make orgonite pyramids for years, and you can go to my blog at freshandaliveblog.com and see my videos there talking about how to do it. I don't have actual demonstrations because the demonstrations that I actually filmed got screwed up, and I haven't gotten back to filming it, but I advise there on how to do it. And then you can also do things as simple as taking cardboard or Wonder Board. You can get it like Home Depot and Lowe's, this masonry board that you put behind tile on bathroom tiling, and
right.
you can cut that stuff out, and you can zip tie it together and cover it with stucco if you want, and you could even put ground up quartz or other semi-precious gemstone or crystals in there
in the stucco mix, right?
Yeah, and just coat the thing. You can put a quartz crystal up in the top of it to enhance it, and you could even fill it with orgonite or other materials. So there's a lot you can do with that. And then stick them around your property and see, notice the sky before and after. You could build like a 3-foot tall pyramid or maybe a 5-foot tall pyramid. It doesn't take a huge amount of resources. And stick it out in your backyard and see how it affects the weather. You'll notice it'll affect the weather.
Have you done that as an experiment?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the way I found this out was because my staff, years ago when I first started making these rest shield pyramids, these powered ones that I make, my staff were working out of my garage, and they were casting them. And so they put some out on the back picnic table in my backyard to have them cure in the sun. And I was out mowing grass, and I saw this big fat chemtrail being laid real low.
Yeah.
And I looked up, and it started spiraling and flying apart. And I was like, what the heck is going on there? And then I got back to the house, and I saw these 3 pyramids sitting out, and I thought, there's no way. And but I looked around, and there was like this 5-mile diameter hole in the chemtrailing, blue sky, and I thought, I wonder. So I drove around town and looked at it, and sure enough, it had like this event horizon, just like a vortex would produce. And then I came back, and I put a total of 5 pyramids out, and these were unpowered. These were just little orgonite pyramids, about 6 inches tall.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how big. 6 inches tall.
Yeah, just about. They're actually, if you go to freshandalive.com, the rest shield pyramids there, it's those without the circuitry. So they're just little 6-inch pyramids, and
they were just scattered around on the outside.
No, they weren't scattered around. They were all together sitting on a table. And so what they do is each individual pyramid will create a little vortex, and they will combine to create a larger, stronger vortex. And so
they have to be close together to do that.
Yeah, ideally, depending on how strong they are, you might be able to separate them a little bit, but you could put them in a circle so that they create a vortex.
Wow.
And I put 5 of them out, and then I went inside for a couple hours, came back out, and as far as the eye could see, the sky was blue. So I got in my car, drove down the highway to see how far out the edge of it was. And it was about 35 miles out, where the chemtrails were all nice and cleared and the skies were normal.
How many 6-inch pyramids was that?
That was 5.
5 in a group.
Yeah. So then I came back home and I put 7 of them out. I just forgot about it. And a couple of weeks later, I went to Disney World with my wife, which is about 75 miles away. And off in the distance, you could see the event horizon out at 75 miles. And then I started doing a lot of tests and experiments. I had a friend with an airplane, and I would go up on his plane sometimes and look at it. Sometimes I would just notice it from commercial flights when I was coming and going here, and also driving around. I just saw these different phenomena that were occurring from these things.
Right. And obviously it doesn't stop anybody spraying, but what it does is it affects the residue before it gets down to the ground, right?
Right. For example, my home shield device, that's a powered scalar wave generator, and it creates a very strong vortex. And the tip of the vortex, it's like an upside down tornado of energy that folds in on itself, just like a tornado. And so it gets stronger as it goes away from the source, just like a tornado.
Does it get smaller or bigger?
It gets smaller. It's like an upside down vortex.
It's the opposite of a shotgun.
Yeah. The big end of it is at ground level, and the point is out in space.
Okay.
And so it acts like a vacuum cleaner and pulls pollutants out of the atmosphere, and that's all it does. It doesn't modify the weather or anything like that. It just cleans pollution out of the atmosphere, sends it into space. And pyramids will do this too, by the way. And when you do that, that balances the ionic charge in the atmosphere, and then you get normal weather for your area. So if they're chemtrailing, normally, if they're just spraying and they're not using scalar interferometers, which we can talk about,
okay.
If they're just spraying, then you'll never see the spray. It'll just disappear as soon as it comes out of the plane. Nowadays, they're using interferometry more and more, which are these types of antennas that generate scalar energy, and they will use frequencies to make the chemtrails hang in the sky longer. So the device will still work, or the pyramid will still work, but it'll just take longer for the skies to clear when they're spraying with those interferometers.
So the positive effect still wins.
Yeah, the pyramid effect still beats it out, because as soon as they stop spraying, it goes away. Usually what happens if you put a pyramid or one of my devices out, usually you'll see within a few days somebody will notice, and then they come and spray heavily, like around the clock with 12 or more planes just continually, and then they give up and it goes away. And if you watch individual trails as they're laid, they'll go away within 15 minutes usually.
Okay. So 6 inches is big enough. You just need several of them, the non-powered kind.
Yeah, you can either use a bunch of little ones or you can build larger ones,
And the ones you're building them out of what is that stuff called that makes the body of it? It's kind of a super toxic stuff that smells terrible, and then it becomes inert when it solidifies, right? Yeah.
The ones that I teach people to make are made of fiberglass resin, which is very toxic. Off gas is really bad. But it's the best material that I've found for most people to make these things with when you're talking about orgonite, because epoxies tend to stick to molds and ruin molds a lot. And also, one of the phenomena that creates the scalar energy is what's known as the Casimir effect and the piezoelectric effect. And that's created by the shrinking of the resin around the materials and the crystals. And what's the function of the stuff that you put in? You like cut up crystals and pieces of rock, and I mean, what does that have to be, and what does it do? Yeah, it sounds like a bunch of New Age nonsense to the uninitiated, so I can understand.
Almost everything true does, actually.
Yeah, really. But so what you do for people that aren't aware of orgonite. Orgonite was a material developed by a man named Karl Hans Wels, who was an Austrian man who was studying the work of Wilhelm Reich. Reich had developed these devices called cloud busters for clearing pollution and balancing the weather and making it rain in droughts and that kind of stuff.
There's still a guy in Europe in England, I guess, that sells those all over the world, right? Yeah.
So Wells was studying Reich's work, and he figured out how to make this material that would do the same thing, that would put out scalar fields. And so he called it orgonite, and it's actually a trademark name. Thanks to Karl Hans Wels for developing that. But basically what you do is you take some kind of non-conducting substrate like a resin, or it could be concrete or plaster or whatever, and you put crystals into it, you put metal particles into it, and you can put crystal powders into it as well. And
how do you know what the best thing to put in and how much?
Well, I'll get to that in just a moment. But so people are making it all different ways and different materials and construction methods. But nobody really understands the physics of what's going on. And because I developed scalar energy technologies and I do understand the physics, here's how it works basically. When you take this non-conducting resin and you put metal particles into it, it creates something called Casimir effect. The Casimir effect happens when you take two pieces of metal, like two sheets of metal, and put them very close together, like maybe a 1/16 of an inch apart, and that will create a charge, but it also creates scalar energy. Mm-hmm. And so typically what most people do when they're making organite, they'll get metal shavings from machine shops and put them into the resin. And very often also they'll use aluminum, which is not a good idea, because aluminum, as Nikolai Kozyrev, this Russian scientist, showed, aluminum actually blocks scalar waves. So you will get some of the Casimir effect to create the scalar energy, but you also get the aluminum blocking it. So it makes weak organite. But okay. A lot of people do that. You want to use something like copper or brass or steel, and instead of shavings, use powders. Use metal powders, because you exponentially increase the Casimir effect when you're using powders. Okay. For example, if you take, let's say, if you've got a gallon jar and you fill it up with a bunch of golf balls, the golf balls are going to have a certain amount of surface area on them.
Yeah.
And then if you dump that out and you fill it up with little BBs, you're going to have exponentially more surface area on the BBs because you get more into that jar. Yeah. So in the same way, the smaller the particles you use in your organite, you're going to exponentially increase the surface area, which will exponentially increase the Casimir effect, and that will exponentially increase the scalar energy activity off of it. So that's one phenomena that occurs with organite. Okay. Then another phenomena is the piezoelectric effect from the crystals themselves, because mainstream science doesn't know this, but these monoatomic elements are hiding within crystals. And this was proven by a guy named Dr. John Malewski, who I have an interview with on my blog at freshandaliveblog.com, where Malewski took plain old glass jars and he ground them up into powder and he put them in a magnetic crucible and he microwaved it. And it actually melted the powdered glass. Now, normally microwaves don't melt glass, but when it's inside of a magnetic crucible, it will. So it melts the glass, and he had all these different metals, these ormus elements that were hiding in there would precipitate out. Gold, platinum, rhodium, palladium, these precious metals are actually plated out, and they would grow like crystals. So even after the glass had cooled and hardened up, the metals would continue to precipitate out and grow. Okay. But he proved that these platinum group metals, gold, silver, mercury, copper, iodine, and a few others, they can exist hiding within matter. They're like this multidimensional matter, and you can extract them out in various ways. But that's what creates the piezoelectric effect, the superconductivity of these monoatomic elements hiding within these crystals. So if you normally, you can take quartz, and because of the piezoelectric effect, you can strike it really quick and it'll shoot out electricity. And this, in fact, is how gas grill igniters work. On gas grills, when you push that little red button, it's actually smacking a piece of quartz that has wires connected to it, and that'll create a spark to light the grill. Right. So that's part of the piezoelectric effect. But what mainstream science doesn't know is that if instead of striking a crystal, if you squeeze on it instead of striking it, that will create scalar waves. And so having a resin with macro crystals in it and powdered crystals in it and metal particles in it, that will, the resin will shrink up around all this stuff and create these phenomena that will create scalar fields and scalar waves.
That's like a continuous squeezing, basically.
Right, it's continuous squeezing. And then if you make the shape into a pyramid or a cone, it's going to send a vortex up through the tip and create a toroidal field or a donut-shaped field with scalar energy around it. And then that can do things like protect you against EMF, structure water, clear chemtrails if you put them outside, balance the weather.
So if somebody wanted to make one of these pyramids, it doesn't have to be super expensive to make, right?
No, they're not expensive at all. You can go on eBay and you can buy metal powders off of eBay, You can buy crystals online, various places, and it's not.
Can you get powdered crystals on eBay too?
I don't know. You might be able to, but I know for sure you can buy rock crushers on little hand crank rock crushers on eBay. I just bought one.
Right.
So yeah, you can. There are various ways of doing it. Sometimes you can buy rock powders, like you can buy magnetite sand on eBay, for example. And yeah, you just throw all that stuff into your orgonite. And for those that really want to do it, what I do is use 3 parts of liquid resin to 1 part of powdered mixture. So I'll mix powdered crystals, macro crystals, and copper powder and brass powder and shungite powder. And shungite is a mineral from Russia that puts out a lot of scalar energy. So I'll mix all that together into this mixture. And then I'll take, let's say, for a 6-inch pyramid, I think it's maybe like 1 cup of that powder mixture to 3 cups of the resin, and just mix it all up really well in a bucket, and then throw the hardener in for the fiberglass, mix that up really well, and then cast it into a pyramid mold, which you can get on eBay. They have pyramid-shaped molds for soap molds, and for candle molds that you can get on eBay. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
You have to wear some kind of breathing protection when you're doing
Absolutely, yeah. You need to get a respirator from, like Home Depot, like their paint department. They've got for $30-40. You can get a respirator that will clear the chemicals. And of course, do it outside with ventilation. You don't want to be cooped up in a room, even with a respirator.
Yeah. And that pretty much cuts it all out if you have one of those on?
Yeah, it will. Assuming that you're not, like say, in a little tiny closed up room breathing.
Yeah, don't do it in a closet.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, because it seems like, we should have millions of those all over the place, really.
Well,
I wonder how the pilots would be reacting to that, because they must know when that stuff is, they can look in the sky and see
they definitely know.
Their plan is not working when those trails keep disappearing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when people put my devices out, the spraying stops working, and then they come and spray heavily for a while, and then they give up and go away. So they definitely know. They just can't pinpoint it because it's not putting out any energy that's strong enough for them to detect, or if it is, they're not bothering with it.
Yeah. I told you the story about the Ghostbusters light guy coming and detecting the home shield that I had outside.
Right.
But he didn't notice the rest shield. I could see it because I knew what was happening on his oscilloscope. But he said, that's some minor thing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I would imagine the non-powered rest shield size pyramids would put out nothing on his scope.
Yeah, they're probably not even detectable by a device like that because, my devices have a powered circuit in them. They're pretty strong. And these devices just capture the ambient energy from the earth and the sun and rebroadcast it. So they're not nearly as strong as my power devices.
You mentioned concrete. What's wrong with doing it in concrete, or is that a good idea?
Well, I've seen people make it out of concrete and plaster, and especially for bigger ones, like if you're making a really big 15, 20-foot high one, that works fine as long as you have the right construction methods. But for small ones, you're not getting enough of the piezoelectric effect because the concrete does shrink, but it doesn't shrink that much. So in a little pyramid, you're just not going to get much out of it.
Right.
But a bigger one, it will.
So the resin really is the best thing, as long as you don't breathe the fumes or anything.
Yeah, for little ones, yeah.
Right.
You can also make them, like I say, you could do something as simple as buying some Wonder Board from Home Depot and cutting out 4 equilateral triangles out of it, and then zip tying them together, and you could get some stucco mix and mix in some quartz powder or some shungite powder or something like that, or some magnetite sand, or all of the above.
But it would just be on the surface, though, right?
No, you mix it into the stucco. Well, it'd be on the surface of the pyramid, but believe me, that's all you need. Huh. And just add a little bit of more adhesive into the stucco, because the powders will kind of, thin it out. And then just put that on the outside of a Wonder Board pyramid, and you got yourself a pretty doggone strong pyramid.
Okay.
For not a lot of money.
I'm assuming all these directions are probably somewhere on your blog or your site, right?
I discuss it on my blog. I don't have like diagrams or anything like that. I just haven't had time to do it. But it's just like this conversation. I do have videos where I explain people how to do it. And I've done lots of interviews like this one. And Patrick Timponi's radio show at oneradionetwork.com, I've described in detail there on a few occasions how to make them.
Okay. And we're talking for the rest shield, it's like roughly a 6-inch height or something, right?
Right.
That size.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in general, I mean, there's so many exciting options that people don't have to be discouraged and despairing that, everything's about to be destroyed, because things aren't only dark in a dualistic plane. There's also a lot of hidden bright spots, right?
Yeah, and my impression is all of these apparently horrible things are going on the planet that seem to be escalating. I think that is just to kick people in the pants that won't wake up and that won't change to take action, because for people like people watching this kind of a show, chances are they're already awake and aware enough that they're going to be just fine. You just have to pay attention and look for solutions for yourself for whatever you're worried about. So, for example, 5G, I just did a 2.5-hour webinar on how to protect yourself against 5G wireless technology and the Internet of Things, and it's on YouTube. And so, people can watch that. I've got tons of things that you can do to protect yourself.
Yeah, how did they look that up on YouTube? What's it called?
Just go to YouTube, search on Ken Rohla 5G, and you'll find it. It's also on my blog at freshandaliveblog.com.
And it's called a webinar, right?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know if I called it a webinar, but I just, I think it's staying healthy with 5G and the Internet of Things.
Okay, that would be really important.
Yeah. Yeah, so, don't be depressed. Don't be disillusioned. All of these things are happening because they have to occur to shift the consciousness on this planet and change things. It's like if people don't get uncomfortable with their status quo lives that have been manufactured for them, then things are just going to keep going as they have been. Yeah. And so, for people that are awake and aware and sensitive, it's going to seem like everything's going to hell in a handbasket, but it has to change. I mean, think about what it's going to take to change a corrupt government like the U.S. government and Congress and all of these corrupt people. Yeah. It's going to take a big emotional, spiritual enema on the planetary scale. Yeah. And it ain't going to be pretty and it's not going to be fun. But if you're not involved in that stuff, if you're living your life in a loving way and in service to others and et cetera, you'll be fine. You'll find the solutions.
Right. Definitely encouraging. So I know we've just about used up our time here. So I encourage everybody to go to freshandalive.com and look at the products and the technologies and the articles and the videos and everything there, and also freshandaliveblog.com. And I think we've just touched on things that could fill up, as usual, many more shows. So I think a good bottom line is what you just said. Don't be depressed, but be part of a different energy and watch what happens.
Yeah, and build yourself some pyramids. As a matter of fact, there are more and more people now teaching how to build pyramids and teaching what you can do with them. I've got a man coming, an Indian man coming middle of, August 17th and 18th. He's coming to Florida. He's going to be speaking in Tampa. His name is Pradeep Patri, and people call him Patrici. And he's going to be teaching meditation combined with pyramids. So basically how to utilize pyramid technology to enhance meditation to increase your ability to manifest what you want. So imagine that, imagine sitting around with your pyramid at your house, meditating in it or around it, and accelerating what you want to create for yourself. This was what was going on naturally at ECETI. We had 350 people there, all in a love frequency, and it was just magnificent. And it was life-changing, for everybody. It was life-changing for me. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be doing as the powers that be are self-destructing, getting together in community. Build yourself a pyramid in your backyard and have a cookout or something, and get your friends together and get in a circle and meditate and get clear about your intentions and have a party, forget about all this fear.
So you had a glimpse of what really would be normal, right? Of humans interacting together.
Yeah.
Not even trying to kill each other or anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's everywhere on this planet, there are amazing, enlightened people that are just aching for community. So, be the nexus of that community in your area and start doing these things, and you'll attract the most amazing people and have a great time.
Yeah, that attraction thing is pretty interesting, because as you have people around you or situations that you don't like, and the tendency is to go out and try to do something externally to change it. And there's equal and opposite forces come back against you. But if you do it just by changing internally on yourself, the reflection changes, which includes all those other people.
Right. That brings up a good point, Richard. When I was at ECETI, there were several YouTubers there that had big YouTube channels, and all of them have been harassed extensively.
Right.
Much more than I have, because they're not, they're opposing the powers that be, let's say. They're pointing out and opposing the powers that be. I don't oppose anybody. I just show a much better way of living that's a lot more fun. Right. And who wouldn't want to do it that way? I don't have to badmouth, whoever.
You don't have enemies.
Exactly. So they can keep doing what they're doing, and people can keep getting attracted to it if that's what they want. But I'm going to have my little game over here that's going to be so much more fun and so much more enjoyable. It's why would anybody want to do that other thing?
Well, and it doesn't negate self-defense or defense of others by in positive means that you have in place to do that. But you don't have to do it with fear and hate.
Absolutely.
Or animosity or anything like that.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I had a lesson in that years ago when I was having these encounters with these reptilian extraterrestrials, and I was griping to them one time about the Bush family, the George Sr. and Jr., and griping about how corrupt and evil they were. Uh-huh. And they said, well, actually, it requires a higher level of consciousness to play the bad guy in your reality. And I was like, whoa, I never thought about that. But then it reminded me of other people in my life who were what I call not teachers, that were teaching me what not to do. With impeccable integrity.
Well, you find out pretty soon that everybody's a disguised teacher that just came for you.
Right. And when you look at the big picture, we're not victims. We came here to have an experience, to grow and to learn, and consciousness creates reality. I've had so many empirical experiences to show me that that's true, that you can't be blaming others, even the powers that be, even the corrupt, whatever you want to call them. I call them world management, Illuminati, deep state, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
You're just getting in victimhood when you start blaming them. The people involved in those systems are combating those negative influences and are winning. And, if you've got the ability to influence things on a national or international policy level, hey, go for it, man. I mean, I say,
sure,
go. But for most people like you and I don't have any sway with Trump or the U.S. Congress or the cabinet.
Yeah.
So I'm, even writing letters or whatever, they don't care.
No,
so I work within my realm of influence, and particularly within my life, to create a really enjoyable, uplifting life for myself and those around me.
Right. And you have access to every one of those people that you don't have access to internally.
Right.
Right. So just kind of waiting for us to discover it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's fun. I hope we can, do this fairly frequently, as often as it works out. I just want people to be encouraged.
Yeah, it's very important for us to get together, regularly and support each other, because it's like ECETI, being there with 350 like-minded people, and they were people from all different walks of life. It wasn't like everybody's in the pyramids or whatever. I mean, there was a very wide variety of people there, but their intention was all the same, and that was to come and to interact with extraterrestrial, interdimensional beings, have a good time. Very, very loving. And Corey Good reminded us all that it's so important for us to get together and support each other from time to time, because the rest of the world is so messed up.
Yeah.
So
right.
getting on your show, I love getting on your show because I love seeing you and talking to you and feeling your vibration and all of the kinds of things that you ask me. It's not the usual stuff that, especially that like a mainstream news program would ask. So it's fun. It's fun to get together. And, I'm fortunate that over the years I've built a community of people around here that we can get together and have potlucks or whatever.
Good.
And so we've got to do that more so that we don't feel disillusioned, so that we do know that there is love on this planet and there's a lot of great things going on here.
Yeah, it is. It's just a little bit under the surface in most cases. So if you're only reading headlines, you may not notice.
That brings up another good point too, Richard. I know, particularly since I was at the Bosnian pyramids and ECETI, it has really, really opened up my third eye and shifted me in a lot of ways. But even before that, probably for the last 9 or 10 months, I've just become really bored with information, like information online, information on YouTube, all these conspiracies and news programs and stuff. Oh, what's the latest that QAnon is saying? Or what's Trump doing or whatever? It's like, I couldn't care less because none of that stuff really has any bearing on my life. You can argue from the standpoint that, what Trump does affects us all and that kind of thing, but not necessarily. In my reality that I've lived in my life, it doesn't matter what's going on with politics or whatever. Man, I just have the best time. I have the best experiences. It hasn't always been easy, but in general, it's been an amazing, wonderful life, and it's because I don't buy into that stuff. But I've just gotten to the point where I'm really, really bored with information. Information only goes so far. And for me, what I found, which is much more powerful and much more useful, is unplugging from all that crap and meditating and meditating and meditating. And when you do it inside of pyramids and you're drinking pyramid water, you have the most amazing magical experiences. And you get all this information pouring in continually that help you to discern shit from shinola, to be blunt. It's like, when we were in Bosnia and I'm hanging out with psychic people, you realize it's so effortless when everybody knows what's really going on around them and can be verified. It's not like we're delusional. Yeah, you can verify psychic experiences.
No, most of the psychic stuff, even if it's well-meaning, is specializing in things that you could never check.
Right. But you can do it for yourself and you can verify it. Many years ago, 25 or more years ago, I was doing out-of-body experiences kind of accidentally. I was interested in having an out-of-body experience because I read this book called 30 Days to an Out-of-Body Experience. And I did all the stuff in the book and none of it worked. But because I was thinking about it, I accidentally manifested an out-of-body experience. And I found out that if I just went to bed at night and it got cold, like if I had the air conditioning running and my upper body got cold, I would go out every time at 3 o'clock in the morning. So then when I knew that I could do it on demand, I started intentionally going to places and seeing things that I could verify. So I would go to work, for example, and I would follow the cleaning people around at work and watch what they were doing. And then when I went into work that morning, I would talk to them and say, hey, did you do such and such and so and so?
Oh, okay. Right.
How'd you know? Or I went and visited my sister at her home that I had never been at and saw everything and then talked to her on the phone and confirmed that I was actually there.
Yeah, that testing and confirmation is really important.
It is. And because the more that you do that kind of stuff and the more that you see that what you're seeing is actually true, then you become more and more, you can rely on your own intuition and senses more and more and develop discernment so that you don't get hoodwinked by any disinfo agents or whatever else.
I wonder why the cold temperature helped you.
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess it's something to do physiologically, but normally when I get cold and I'm dreaming, it puts me in a different place, which actually is kind of a little scary. Like when I get cold, I'll start having bad dreams.
Oh, okay.
But that will send me out.
So the same setup that causes the bad dreams also helps you get out.
Yeah.
Your body.
And there's nothing terrible. It's just like, it's like one of those dreams where you're running from a monster and you can't get away from it.
Not your favorite kind. And the nice thing about practicing the out-of-body stuff when at night is that you don't worry about your body being okay.
Right.
Because it's going to be, left to some degree during regular dreams anyway.
Right. Yeah, and you don't have to worry about like leaving your body and not coming back. That's impossible.
Right.
The first time I did it, when I floated up through the ceiling of the apartment I was in and went through it was so funny. It was almost like a cartoon. As I went through the ceiling and the roof of this building, I could see the cross section of the rafters and the ceiling and the roof. And it was pretty funny, actually. And then I got out into the sky, and I'm looking around the neighborhood. I was probably a couple hundred feet up, looking around the neighborhood, just marveling at everything. And I didn't know I was really out of body. I just thought I was dreaming.
Right.
And then I looked up in the sky, and I saw it was cloudy. And it actually was cloudy that night. And I saw I saw my head back on the pillow in bed, and I realized, holy crap, I'm back in bed. I'm out of body.
Right.
And so I immediately got scared. And then when I got scared, I popped back in immediately. I was like wide awake.
Well, the other thing people sometimes don't realize is if you're out of body, you still have a body. It's just the inner layer. It's just a little bit lighter.
Right.
Right.
And it can go through things.
Yeah, stuff like that. But it still looks like you.
It's apparently not tied to your physical area, because I would just like show up somewhere else in another place, in the around the world.
Yeah, it's just like what we were talking about, the speed of superluminal light. It's not really a speed. It's more of an instantaneous ability to be somewhere else. Yeah.
But the bottom line is, what can we do with it? And what we can do with it is get insights that can really help us in our daily life.
Right.
After I did that for a couple of years, I came to the realization that the point really is to be here and to be grounded. Yeah. And so I haven't done out-of-body experiences in many years because there's no need. It's like I don't have to go out of body to get information. I can just intuit it and have it come in.
Yeah, so and it's going to find you anyway.
Right.
But it's
very, very important to be grounded and, to be very centered and normal amidst all the chaos that's coming down on the planet, because it's easy to freak out when you look at the news.
Yeah, it really is. And it's actually happening on that level. But the control point of it is, even though this is totally counterintuitive, it's in each person. And every person is the absolute controlling center of their entire universe.
Right.
And it's beyond logic, but it's still true.
Yeah, and that's why the powers that be, they know this very well, and that's why they spend so much effort and money and time to mind control people and to create their realities for them.
Right.
So the more that you step out of that, which means, unplugging from media, getting off of social media, actually interacting with people in person instead of everything remotely.
You mean
virtual
like
realities.
Humans, right? The kind we used to have in the world and everything.
Right. And when you do that, then you develop discernment, you develop connections with people, and you also aren't exposed to all the negativity and fear and mind control that's being heavily bombarding people. Yeah.
In fact, one of the biggest self-defense mechanisms is dropping any kind of malice toward anybody.
Right. Yeah. Again, it goes back to realizing that you're not a victim. Nobody's forcing this on you. Nobody's making you do this. We all came here to play the game of consciousness. Right. And so, it's like I was talking to somebody at ECETI about, years ago, I became untaxed, and I had an offshore bank account trust, and, became a sovereign state citizen, all these things. And it was all completely legal. In order to get out of the tax system and those kinds of things and the control systems. And it worked, but it was basically trading one form of slavery for another, because I was always having to study to stay on top of the latest laws and stuff.
That's right. And if you run into a corrupt judge, they don't care about that. They'll just put you in jail anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very, very true.
Legally.
Very true. Yeah, I had, I went up having a 10-month audit with the IRS. And interestingly enough, they, when they audit you, they're going to get money out of you, because they won't come after you. I mean, if they go to the trouble of coming after you, they're going to get money out of you. And so all of the sovereignty stuff I was doing, they didn't have a problem with that. But they conjured up something with the pottery business that I had which was even went against their own rulings. I mean, they even admitted it, but it's like you just said, they don't care. It's just like, well, you owe us this amount of money, and if you don't like it, take us to court. You know?
Exactly. Prove you're innocent.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's an energy component to everything, and if it's telling you you probably shouldn't do whatever it is, even if it looks on the surface like it's okay, eventually you start listening.
Yeah, right. And it was a very good educational process to show me what really works and what doesn't, how the system really works. And so now I just play the game the way the wealthy people do. You know, they've set up all these loopholes and things for them.
Yeah. So anybody can do that.
Right. It's just educating yourself.
Yeah. And which is the same with everything else. You can either do your homework and learn about all the relevant things that do affect you, that are potential ways to take care of yourself in a positive way, or you can just not do the homework and suffer the consequences, which is not as much fun. Right.
Yeah, it does take some effort to stay on top of things, but fortunately there are people like me and you out there that kind of summarize and present information to help people. And so you just have to find those sources.
Well, if you do take the time to learn something, it makes sense to then share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Not to tell them what to do, but just say, look, here's some more information. Maybe you don't have to go through all the trial and error that takes years and years, and you can just start with that and take it further.
Exactly. I mean, I kind of feel like I have a moral obligation to share what I learned because, for example, I've had radiation poisoning 3 times, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So, you know, if I learn how to neutralize radioactivity from that, then I definitely feel an obligation to share it.
Yeah, there are people who want to know that stuff. So, all right, well, I guess we have to wrap it up for now, but you have the invitation to come back soon, and we'll stay in touch. And
all right.
Thanks for visiting.
Oh, my pleasure. Always fun talking to you, Rich.
We'll see you soon. Okay, there goes Ken Rohla, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the show, and a lot of useful information if you let it sink in and build on it. And I'll be digesting everything that came out in that show for a while, too. I think it's really valuable, and I like, what I like to do is find people of expertise and really clear character going together, open and really thinking always of using what they've got, their technology and their expertise and their abilities for the benefit of everybody, because they understand intuitively, and maybe more than that, that when you help anybody else do things for people, you're doing it literally for yourself. And the result on you is not later, it starts instantaneously. So if you want to be really selfish, which I recommend, just pour out everything you can to help other people. And if you want to help them and you care about their well-being, work on yourself. It's the most direct way to help everybody in your universe. So a lot of things that we talked about were a little bit beyond the usual logical, intuitive ways that people reason, but there are deeper levels of understanding. And it's always fun to talk with Ken because he's in touch with a lot of them. And I still have an invitation out there for Bigfoot. If they had seen him at the ECETI place, to ask him if he wants to be on the show. We'll have him on anytime. But prior to that, we'll keep having the most inspirational people we can for you. And if you have any responses or input or questions or comments or anything, you can email them in, richard@lostartsradio.com. And remember that if you don't see it, in case you don't see us in the future on major platforms, because they're starting to attack and censor more and that sort of thing, find us at lostartsradio.com and at brighteon.com, which just took a step up for Brighteon 2.0. It's getting more services and trying to be an alternative that doesn't censor for some of the major platforms that do. So support brighteon.com just by watching videos there and by uploading videos there, and that kind of thing helps them reach more people, which is what they need right now. Mike has really done a great job with that. And if you're wanting to get deeper into some of these things, as we mentioned on the show, and you're ready to start transforming your own life, check out planetaryhealingclub.com, planetaryhealingclub.com. And we'll see you there live every week. And we get into some next level stuff that you can participate in. And we work on people's life and health situations with information that they can use. So otherwise, watch for our public videos that we'll keep putting out during the week. And the inspiring people and individuals are lined up and ready to appear on the Sunday shows. And we'll see you there too. Have a good week. See you soon.